All right, good morning. It's 9:30. Let's get this show on the road. We are going to be talking about Dylan Thomas's poem, Do Not Go Gentle. Let me go ahead and share that. There we are. So we're going to go over this real quick, though. I got all your stuff graded that's been turned in. Take a look at that if you can. If you think I'm missing something, let me know. Quizzes will be running until noon. Make sure that you get that done. I don't have everybody in the class that has done that. And then reminder, Flipgrids. I got 5 videos yesterday, guys. It's going to suck when you get a D because you didn't do your Flipgrid. So make sure you get those done. Dylan Thomas, poet from the early 20th centuries, died kind of young. He wrote this poem called Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. So let's do this. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late, they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. All right, so this poem was first published in 1951 by the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. Though the poem was dedicated to his father, it contains a universal message, right? The poem encourages the dying, the sick, and the elderly to fight bravely against death. The poem also celebrates the vibrancy and the energy of human life, even though it is fragile and short. So real quick, a summary of the poem. I would quickly summarize it as: don't calmly and peacefully welcome death. The elderly should passionately fight against death as their lives come to an end. Resist the coming of the darkness of your death. Smart people at the end of their lives understand that death is inevitable. But because they haven't yet said anything startling or revolutionary, nothing powerful enough to shock the world like a bolt of lightning, refuse to peacefully accept death. Good people, seeing the last moments of their lives pass like a final wave, mourn the fact that they weren't able to accomplish more. Because even small actions might have moved joyously in a green bay. That is, they could have made a difference in the world. So they resist the oncoming darkness of their death. Daring people who've lived in the moment and embraced life to the fullest, metaphorically catching a joyride across the sky on the sun, realize too late the sun is leaving them behind, and that even they must die, but they refuse to peacefully accept death. Serious people about to die realize with sudden clarity that even those who have lost their sight can, like meteors, be full of light and happiness. So they resist the oncoming darkness of their death. And you, Dad, are close to death, as if on the peak of a mountain. Burden me and gift me with your passionate emotions, I pray to you. Do not peacefully welcome the night of death. Resist the oncoming darkness of your death. A couple different themes within this poem. Obviously, the big one is death and defiance. He's acknowledging that death is inevitable. Everybody dies sooner or later, but that doesn't mean that people should just simply give up and give into it. Instead, the speaker argues that people should fight fiercely and bravely against death. Indeed, the speaker suggests death helps to clarify something that people too often forget, that life is precious and worth fighting for. The poem tries to teach its readers how to face death. It starts with a basic fact. Everybody does it. Wise men at their end know dark is right. In other words, they recognize they can't escape it. But that doesn't mean that these wise men simply accept it. Instead, They do not go gentle into that good night. Night, metaphor for death here. They resist, trying to win some more life and more time. The speaker treats us as a model for other people to emulate, right? They want them to rage against death. They should burn and rave, fight fiercely and bravely as their lives approach their end. One might wonder, though, why the speaker wants people to fight against death if it's ultimately inevitable. The speaker answers the question by describing a series of different people. He describes wise men, good men, wild men, grave men, and then lastly his father. They all fight against death in one way, shape, or form. When they're confronted with death, they realize they haven't accomplished everything they wanted to, and they fight for more time. The wise men, in lines 4 through 6, realize their words have not forked lightning. In other words, they may haven't changed the world or created new knowledge with their lives, and they fight against death so they can have more time to make these impacts on the world. The wild men, the speaker describes down here, they spend their lives in joyous and reckless fashion. They caught and sang the sun in flight. But when they face death, they realize that they have really just watched it pass by. They have regrets about the frivolous way they spent their time, and they fight for more time so that they can do something worthwhile. In both cases here, death helps these people very differently realize that their lives are precious, that they need to use their time on earth the best they can. Death offers a kind of corrective, helping them reconnect with what really matters in life. So even though death is inevitable, it's worth fighting bravely against, because doing so helps reveal what really matters in life. It's also a little bit about grief and family and old age. If you look at the last one, he switches it up right at the end, the final stanza. In most of the poem, he's talking generally, and in the last stanza, he gets really specific. And then he's talking about his father. It changes the way that you read the poem, because now it feels more personal than it did before. He was talking in generalities about good men and wild men, wise men, right? And then here in the last, he changes it. And you, my father, there on the sad height. It's advice about how to face death with dignity, right? But that final stanza, that the speaker is now addressing their father, right? It feels much less universal at that point. Instead, it seems like the poet is talking directly to his father and offering him encouragement as he faces death. Instead of just being about death in general, it's a poem about family, about grief, and of old age. The challenge for the reader is balancing those two views, right? Is it general or is it specific? And how might that apply in different situations? Okay, because it can be, you're thinking about your audience, right? In Soapstone, who is the audience? Is it for his father or the speaker's father, or is it more general? And I think that depending on how you read it, and obviously what point of life you're in right now, your situation might read differently depending on that. So keep that in mind. So line by line, let's go real quick, 1 through 3. So this establishes its theme and its forms. It sets up what the rest of the poem is going to be about. In the first line, we have a lot of consonants with this NT sound, not gentle, into, night. Lots of repetitions there. It really helps to underscore the fierce passion and fighting spirit. The speaker says people shouldn't give up when they face death. The speaker doesn't want to be gentle about it, right? Old people should burn and rave at the close of day. So when they face death, that's what he calls the close of day. They shouldn't just go to accepting and willing. They should be defiant the whole time. There's an emphasis of passion, and he wants to see by using another metaphor. The people, it's right here, old age should burn and rave, right? Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The word rage underscores the intensity that the speaker hopes to bring out against death, right? He represented it through another metaphor of darkness and light. Rage against the dying of the light. We have the repetition of the I sound, dying, light. They're linked together. This specific type of poem is a villanelle. It's like a strict pattern poet. And they're really, I mean, you have to be pretty talented to get them to fit together. It's like one of those really hard puzzle pieces, right? This first stanza of the villanelle really sets up the rest. So this first line right here, do not go gentle into that good night, is repeated at the end of stanza 2, at the end of stanza 4, and then combined again in stanza 6. Line 3 is repeated at the end of stanza 3, at the end of stanza 5, and at the end of the poem. 6 stanzas total here. Okay? And so really, once you have this first stanza written, you have the last lines for the rest of the poem. And you got to be able to put it together so it makes sense, so that it all works. It's one of the most famous types of this poem in English. It's often when people say, here's a villanelle, this is the one that they pull out. Yeah, every so often the speaker who's reading it, their passion gets a little out of hand and they slips. So there's a specific meter that we're not really going to get into, but it's iambic pentameter in here. And it's about stressed and unstressed syllables. And it's another piece of the puzzle that's really hard to put into a villanelle. So that's the form of the poem. Let's keep going. Lines 4 to 6. Lines 4 through 6 talk about wise men, about people making their mark with their intelligence. People who have a deep understanding of life. Anyone could be counted to live their lives fully. One might think it would be like these wise people who know how to do it, and that's not always what happens. They know that they have to die, that death is inevitable again, but they still don't go gentle into that good night. They always want that little bit more to be able to contribute, to be able to find something new out, to be able to leave their mark, right? The lightning right here in line 5, symbolizes inspiration and change. Lightning splits into branches or forks as it travels from storm cloud to the ground. So to fork lightning is to create or to generate lightning. So these wise men have had a burst of inspiration that would change or transform the world, that the way that lightning does. It also leaves a mark. If you've ever had the experience of looking at lightning as it flashes, it leaves that after image, right? You can see the after image in your vision after it is gone. So it leaves a mark. Not permanent, but it's about change and about leaving your mark. Line 7 to 9, let's talk about the good men. Good men near their death. Crying how bright their frail deeds may have died in a green day. All that good men have in front of them is death, but they aren't satisfied with their lives. They are crying out in pain and protest. The frail deeds or weak and insignificant things that these good men could have done, right? Bright, that is glorious or worthwhile. If the deeds had been bright, they would have danced in the green bay. In other words, they would have been celebrated, they would have been full of joy, and spent their time in a peaceful and happy place. But since their deeds weren't bright, these men want to forestall death and rage against the dying of the light. In other words, they fight passionately for more time. That's what we're talking about. The refrain, rage, rage against the dying of the light, works a little differently when it first appeared in the poem's opening stanza. He first describes how the good men actually act rather than how one should act. I can't read. The stanza that follows the pattern that began with the previous, it's ABA rhyme scheme right here. There are two formal elements that pop out. Good men, right here, and then this dancing into Green Bay, making an impact. They're on the brink of death, but they want to still contribute. Wild men is the next one. Wild men have lived their lives to the fullest, right? They're the risk takers. They caught and sang the sun in flight. This is a metaphor. It describes how they have pursued joy with reckless abandon, going so far as to fly with the sun. But they learned too late that they've made this mistake. They grieved it on its way. In other words, they regret the time that they spent doing all these mostly foolish or wild things. And now they can't get that time back. A lot of people read this as an allusion to the myth of Icarus. So Icarus wants his father to make him wings, and he does. And the father made him wings, and he tells his son, do not fly too close to the sun. Don't get too high. Because the wings are made of wax. And when he does fly too close to the sun, because of course he does, the wings melt and he falls into the sea. So wild men, like Icarus, end up grieving their own wild pursuit of the things they were told not to get too close to. All right, line 13 to 15, grave men. We have another group of people come in, right? Grave men near death or serious. Grave is another word for serious. They thought that blind eyes were dull and lifeless and they had no light in them, but they can suddenly see with blinding sight that they were wrong. In other words, these serious men have a powerful revelation toward the end of their life. They learn that blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Gay there means happy. This simile compares the expression, turns a blind person's eyes, sightless, into meteors. Meteors, a chunk of space rock. I'm sure you know this. When it's coming through the atmosphere, it burns, and it's really bright. And even though it only lasts a few moments, it's still very bright. So even though they can't see, they can still be full of this joy and happiness. The meteors here act as a symbol for a flash of intense feelings or inspiration, similar to the lightning we had above. The whole stanza implies that these serious men learn that blind eyes can be full of light and happiness. In other words, these men have preferred seriousness over joy, and they have now learned that anyone can find happiness. They realize it a little too late, that they could have found happiness too. Same rhyming and jamming. Okay, let's go to the last one. And you, my father. The speaker ends describing how different groups of people confront death, right? That's all we've had from right through here, okay? And it's been very universal, and he's made some connections, trying to be he's trying to connect different groups of people together. But here it shifts, right? Here the speaker starts speaking directly to his or her father, who's facing death on the sad height. It's a metaphor for old age, that sad height. You have basically climbed the mountain. Mountain is your age, and when you get to the top of the mountain in your old age, the last step off is death, and that you're on a height because you're nice and old. So there's a little bit of enjambment here where you follow from one line to the next. That kind of symbolizes this next step in the journey, right? The speaker wants his father to resist death with the same passion as the good men or grave men or wise men or anybody else, right? He wants him to rage. Do not go gentle. In line 17, right here, this last real line in a villanelle, because remember, these are two just repetitions of above. He asked his father to curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. He's encouraging his father to be fierce, to passionately battle with death, to rebel against it. He doesn't care what form of the passion takes, right? He can curse him, he can bless him. He just wants him to have this strong emotion, this fight in him. Even though they're opposite, right? Cursing and blessing are opposite. And no relationship is explained between them. But they stack them on one another. And they mean just doesn't matter what form it takes. I want you to fight. The stanza closes the poem following the standard end, right? Do not go gentle, rage, rage. He's repeating these lines. But something important has changed in this last repetition, right? It doesn't seem general. He's not talking to random people anymore. It's become more personal. And he's not just giving general advice to anyone who's going to listen. Instead, the speaker is directly addressing his or her own father, trying to convince him to fight death. So what starts very general ends up being a very personal villanelle toward the end. A couple of major symbols that happen throughout this poem. Let's talk about light. Light in the poem is a symbol for life itself. In line 3, we have the speaker talking about to rage, rage against the dying of the light. In other words, fight death, try to preserve life. In contrast to life, the speaker thinks of death as darkness or night, because he says that twice. Do not go gentle into that good night. Though it might appear good, and death might invite peacefulness, the speaker urges the reader to look to life or the light. More broadly, within the poem, light serves as a symbol for the good and vibrant parts of life. Joy, inspiration, happiness. Light in the poem represents a reason to live. The speaker in the poem, they offered light-filled symbols. We got lightning, we have bright water, meteors, each of which talk about flash or light, the spark of life. That's what it's bringing. Lightning, we discussed briefly. Lightning symbolizes inspiration, a flash of insight that can change the world. We talked about that already. A green bay in stanza 3. Green bay, a bay is a coastal inlet of water. It appears green in this because it's symbolizing fulfillment and calm. So it's basically, you're supposed to visualize, quite literally, depicting an old man standing either on a beach or in a boat, watching the waves roll into shore. Symbolically, the waters can be thought of as life itself. Remember, water brings life, especially here on planet Earth. The brilliant green color, symbolizing the will to live. So not only life, but productive and fertile life as well. Meteors, we talked about. So, we don't need the rest of this. I made a lot of notes on iambic pentameter. We're probably not going over that. The poem itself is a metaphor about making sure that you've lived your life to the fullest, and that when that time comes, because we know it's going to come for everybody, to make sure that you have no regrets and that you don't welcome it, but you fight against it as much as you can by living your life to the fullest. Go out, have experiences, think about life, think about the ways that the things you do every day make life worth living. Don't waste your time, and always fight for that one more day to kind of either bring your life meaning, like we have through wise men and good men right here, or to reflect on the deeds that you've done and how it has made your life complete. Okay? That is, do not go gentle into that good night. All right, let's stop that. Let's take a look at teams for a second. All right, I dropped a couple of things in teams today. If you have not taken these 2 quizzes, make sure that you do. They are due at noon. I am closing them. Also, I did not have a lot of you actually complete any of the non-test vocab exercises. Remember, every one of those that you complete is 5 points extra credit on your test. So I got people that got like a 45 or a 50 on the test. If you would have done your 10 vocab practice tests, you would have had 100. There's no excuse. Anybody shouldn't have 100 on the vocab test. Just go and practice. How do you go and practice? It's pretty simple. Go to vocab unit 5. Click on this link. Play any one of these. I'm going to give you one of these top 3 as a test. So if you want to do those to learn the words, do that. If you want to do any of these others, have fun. I will give you credit for anything that is, where it says take test. Okay? Once you do that, put my email in. I know I've gone over that, but that seemed to be difficult. Let's take another look. You put your name up here at the top. You put my email down here at the bottom. You don't need to take a picture. You don't need to send it in. Put your name. Put my email. There we go. It's done. We should be working on sections 3 and 4 in Of Mice and Men today. And tomorrow you will be having a quiz on Thursday. And your chapter questions are due on Thursday. I am checking your chapter 1 and 2. And how I do that is I come into your novel group. I look under Files. And I click on your study guide questions. And then I read them and give you points. This is where it goes. Okay? If you haven't done them, start a new Word document and call it study guide questions. You don't need to make another one for 3 and 4. Go into this one and continue answering questions at the bottom. It automatically saves it. I will go in and grade them. I will put the points in your assignment and you'll know exactly how much you got. So that's that. If you're having problems, email me. I'll try and help you out, but I don't think I can make it any clearer. Let's see. Anything else? Vocab Unit 4. Make sure that's done. I don't think I have anything else. If you have anything else for me, let me know and I will answer the question. You can either stick around or throw it in the conversation and I can get those answers to you quickly. Other than that, that's it for today. You are free to go into your novel groups and start chapters 3 and 4. Have a good day.